Alright, you knew we had to round out the trio. The Stealth Archer is a bit of a meme in Skyrim because it's a surprisingly effective way to play through the game, especially if you didn't boost the difficulty. It gives you a huge advantage by letting you chunk through an enemy's hit points before they even know to retaliate. Generally, as you go backwards from Skyrim, stealth as an archetype gets weaker and weaker. So today we're going to learn how to make the most of a rough situation. If you're familiar with the first two videos I made like this, then you should have a decent understanding of the structure. We'll go over character creation, explain how the skills we use work fairly in depth, then, when we go to finish off the game, we'll get some extremely powerful enchanted equipment and see how far we can min-max our build. Ready? Let's go. So, how does one make a thief in the world of Daggerfall? Let's start by picking a wood elf. We're going with a wood elf because we're planning to use a bow as our primary weapon, and they get bonuses when using missile weapons. Our primary skills are stealth, mercantile, and illusion. Stealth is fairly obvious why. Mercantile maybe seems a bit strange, but I figure we should be good at fencing our ill-gotten gains. Illusion will give us access to invisibility and light. Light, with default settings in Daggerfall Unity, is pretty much pointless in my opinion. Invisibility is better, but also pretty expensive for what it does, and how many enemies are just able to see you anyways. I want to try and make heavy use of invisibility in this playthrough to maximize the chances it has to prove itself. For our major skills, we're going with pickpocket, lockpicking, and mysticism. Pickpocket and lockpicking should be fairly self-explanatory. Mysticism has spells like open, hence its inclusion here. How important it ends up being remains to be seen. For our minor skills, we're taking archery, backstabbing, critical strike, alteration, climbing, and jumping. If you're wondering why all of our combat skills are here, in the least important tier, the reason is simple. This is not a combat-focused class. Bleeds for Mercy II and Morpheus are both extremely combat-heavy. They specialize in confronting enemies head-on and coming out on top. Stealth classes, by contrast, specialize in never being seen in the first place. At least, that's the RP. Daggerfall's unique leveling system makes it so that only one of our minor skills actually contributes to our overall character level. That's the real reason they're in minor skills, because I don't want this character to level up too much from just being in combat. Alteration is also here because it's going to be helpful in explaining one of the other skills later on, in addition to the fact that it can enhance our climbing and jumping skills. Alright, cool, skills done. Our attribute distribution is going to be a little strange as well. We dropped our willpower and endurance to 10, and then we'll drop agility and luck by 5 each. This is so that we can pump our strength and intelligence to 70, and maximize our personality and speed. Strength will help us carry more of the stuff we steal. Intelligence, as always, gives us more spell points, and speed will be helpful for evading guards and other enemies. Personality is really only going to be useful for our mercantile skill, but we're going to force this attribute to be useful in at least one of these playthroughs. Alright, we're almost done. Everybody's favorites are up next, advantages and disadvantages. First up, expertise in missile weapon. This is just because we're going to be using a bow and arrow in this playthrough. We're also going to take an expertise in short blade just for our backup weapon. Next will be increased magery 2x. There isn't any real reason we wouldn't be able to take 3x, but I like to leave that to builds with a heavy focus on magic. Finally, we're going to take immunities to magic, paralysis, poison, and disease. These are mainly for convenience. Not using restoration magic makes curing poisons and diseases kind of annoying, and getting paralyzed is never fun. Immunity to magic is so that we can avoid getting stopped by the sleep spell. We'll balance these out with critical weaknesses to each element damage type: shock, frost, and fire. Then we're going to take damage from sunlight and damage from holy places. We're going to be out at night a lot anyways, so this isn't really going to be a huge disadvantage. Even if we do get caught somewhere that might hurt us, these disadvantages have damage that ticks really slowly. Additionally, since they tick for a set amount, more hit points from higher levels can actually help mitigate this on its own. Since we're already planning to be out at night, I'm going to grab darkness-powered magery, but only the lesser version. This will cut down the number of spell points that we have during the day. Finally, Forbidden Shield type Tower Shield. We'll bump our maximum hit points per level to 10, and this gets our leveling speed to exactly 0.3x, which will make leveling up quite a bit easier. Now let's do our career quiz and we can get started with the run. During the quiz, we managed to get a bonus of 18 points to our stealth skill. That means we get to start with an astoundingly high 55 in our stealth at level 1. We crash into Privateer's Hold and set to work. work. Our last bit of ado here is this. This run's goal is to test how strong or useful the thieving skills we've chosen are. As such, our only real restrictions are these. We cannot buy items from shops. They must be stolen. Second, we cannot use the banking system to take out loans. Any and all gold we earn must be acquired fairly. Part of this is to make absolutely certain that we use these skills, and part of this is because I feel like I've been using the bank as a crutch. Finally, we may not do anything that will lead to an invitation from the Dark Brotherhood. We're thieves, not murderers after all. Basically, this just means that if we get caught stealing, we can't kill the guards. Alright, are you guys ready? We equip our bow, and it's time to mosey on out. First, the encounter against the very first rat. And here's where I'm going to give a quick refresher on combat. If you watch the melee video, this will be mostly redundant, so I'm going to keep it short. Watch that one if you want a full breakdown. In Daggerfall, there are many factors that will affect your 2-hit score. Chief among them is your skill with the weapon and the material level of that weapon. I created a little spreadsheet to calculate our 2-hit score when we input all the variables, both our own and our targets. Our 2-hit score against this rat should be about 22 or 23. Now, when we make an attack against an enemy in Daggerfall, it rolls a D100 die. However, contrary to more modern systems, we want the die to roll low. Our 2-hit score must be higher than the die in order to successfully land a hit. Keep this in mind going forward. All skills in Daggerfall are handled by some manner of D100 roll. Thieves will actively use a much wider variety of skill checks than warriors or mages do. This leads to our first thieving skill. Stealth. Stealth in Daggerfall is a little bit strange. If you're like me and came from the newer games, it might not be intuitive that enemies sometimes just can't see you, even if you're not crouching or in sneak mode. You see, crouching and sneak mode don't actually do anything mechanically except slow you down, but I'll get exactly into why that matters in a bit. At the most basic level, stealth starts with two things: sight and hearing. If you meet the conditions to be seen or heard, a stealth check is made. Enemies can see in a 100-meter semicircle in front of them, which gets blocked by walls and doors. Enemies can hear in a 25-meter circle all around them, which is cut to 12.5 meters if there's a wall in the way. Doors have no impact on hearing, even if they're closed and locked. Enemies can only hear you if you're moving within that range. So we know the conditions under which enemies can see and hear you. How exactly does the stealth skill factor into this? When you're within range to be seen or heard, enemies will roll a check against your stealth skill, and if their D100 roll is higher than your stealth chance, you'll be detected and they'll start to attack. And here's where we dig into the code of the game. Under enemysenses.cs, there's a boolean for the stealth check. In here, you see where the stealth chance value is created and subsequently rolled against. This value uses a function called calculate stealth chance. This will first check if there's something overriding your stealth skills, like illusion magic that we'll get into later. Then it checks two things: how far away you are and how high your stealth skill actually is. The calculation looks a little complex, so let's simplify it a bit. This is the formula we're using, and these are the two values we care about. X is going to be our distance to the target in meters, and Y is going to be our skill level. Since we know our skill level and it doesn't change that much, I'm going to fill it out so we only have one variable. Yes, I know, it's math. You hate it, but here's why this is helpful. Now we know for certain how close we can be to the enemy before we have any chance of alerting them. For us, at a stealth skill of 55, we can be as close as 23 meters before the enemy has a chance of detecting us. If we're at least that far away, our stealth chance is always at or above 100, which means the enemies can't detect us unless we get closer. From here, having the distance to the enemy means having our chance to avoid being detected. Undetectable at 23 meters means a 50% chance to avoid detection at 11 meters. Decimals are truncated. This remains true at every skill level. At skill level 100, we can be as close as 12 meters and still have no chance of detection, letting us get as close as 6 meters before we have a 50% chance at detection. Fun fact, at the minimum skill level of 3, enemies have about a 23% chance to spot you as soon as you're within sight 100 meters away. Sounds simple enough, right? So what's the point of sneak mode or crouching? Well, once you've been detected, you can try to evade your enemies again. But not only only do you have to get some distance, since the enemy is running straight to you, you also need to move at half your movement speed. You can do this by crouching and or hitting the sneak button. How useful is this? Not very, in my experience. Enemies stay alerted for around 8 in-game hours, or about 20 minutes real time. You can evade enemies for that long, but I don't know anybody who wants to cast a lock spell and stand still for 20 minutes. We will see if we can make use of this knowledge eventually, but more often than not, it's just more time efficient and, in my opinion, fun to kill the enemy and move on. Speaking of moving on, now that we've completely cleared this dungeon and gotten to level 2, let's blow this popsicle stand and begin our life of crime, shall we? We're going to head to a major city. Let's go with Wayrest for now. There's no rush for us. We're going to blow off Brisienna if she ever sends us a letter. In fact, this entire main quest is going to be on hold while we do some petty crime. First things first, however, let's stop by the Mages Guild. We want to pick up a few of the canned spells that are relevant to our build. Primarily, we want invisibility and a suite of utility spells that can help us both in and out of combat. But what's this? We can't afford the spells we want. Oh no, whatever shall we do? Well, we're thieves, so we might as well go steal some stuff. While we're in Wayrest, we're going to engage in a few different forms of thievery. First things first, I'm going to show you the most profitable method of stealing available to us. Lesson 1, breaking and entering. In Daggerfall, buildings close after a certain hour. If you inspect any business after hours, it'll tell you when it opens and closes for the day. The doors to the buildings will be locked, but that doesn't stop us, of course. Our main options for locked doors will be the same as if we're inside of a dungeon. We can attempt to pick the lock on the door, or we can attempt to cast an open spell. These methods are preferred for one simple reason. The guards don't get alerted. If you're at all familiar with Daggerfall, you almost certainly know that you can bash doors down. This is not only convenient, but necessary for anybody who isn't specialized in lockpicking. In dungeons, this is fairly intuitive, as the door swings open and allows you to enter whatever room or closet it was hiding. This works exactly the same in the overworld, only a successful opening will instantly put you inside the building you were attempting to open. Very convenient, right? Here's the rub. Every single time you hit the door you're trying to open, you have about a 10% chance to alert the guards, after which you'll either have to flee from them or face the consequences and go to jail. I'm going to save crime and punishment for a different video. For now, we're going to bash this door down. Now that we're here, why? What benefit does breaking in at night provide us? That's simple. It lets you loot the whole store. Everything that the shop was selling during the day is suddenly 100% off with no checks required. This is by far one of the best ways to get money in Daggerfall. Here's the best part, however. Stolen items are treated exactly the same as every other item in the game. Newer games like Skyrim and Oblivion have a tag on items in your inventory that will inform you if the item is stolen. This extends to an extra mechanic where most merchants won't deal in hot merchandise. In Morrowind, if you successfully steal an item from a merchant, that precludes you from ever selling that type of item to that merchant ever again. For example, if you steal a diamond from Nalcaria, you can still trade and do business with her. However, if you ever try to sell her a diamond, she will know you stole hers and won't be happy about it. We're going to spend a couple of nights stealing everything that we can from a few stores and then surrender to the guards and go to jail. Side note, I died a few times during this, probably due to my weakness to sunlight, so watch out if you took that too, I guess. Getting caught at 6 p.m. indoors seems to avoid this issue. We'll check our inventory after getting out of jail, and you'll notice we still have everything that we stole on our crime spree. This is why this method is so powerful. Even if we don't manage to evade the guards, everything that we steal is ours to keep forever. This is obviously an extremely powerful gold-making method. We're going to avoid busting down doors from now on. It's not for no reason, however. You see, we've already made all of the money you could possibly need to complete the main story in just this one little crime spree. A little under 30,000 gold. However, for how materially useful this is, it doesn't really help us train any skills. We will maybe use an open spell and a single use of our lockpicking skill, but that's it. Because I've elected to put all of the combat-focused skills into our minor skills, leveling up is going to be a little bit different than in previous playthroughs. Playing as a thief necessitates some rather intentional grinding. During the melee video, I mentioned that the biggest weakness the melee-only playstyle has is really how slow it is to level its skills. For our own reference, we're going to try leveling normally for a bit. That is, I won't be abusing custom spells to level quickly. We're still going to pick up those canned spells we want though. Recall, Spider Touch, Shadow Form, and Invisibility. Alright, so we've done a little B&E, but now I really want to level my thieving skills. What should I be doing? It's time for our second method, Shoplifting. This is going to be our primary method of leveling, as it gives us an opportunity to train many different skills. Attempting to use the steal option when at a store trains our pickpocket skill. When we inevitably fail, the guards will be called, and we can usually cast an invisibility spell or evade them, which will train our illusion skill. Evading them is actually still important, even if we get to keep our loot, and it's for a very simple reason. If the guards damage you and attempt their arrest, you lose regional reputation. If your reputation falls enough, guards will continuously spawn to arrest you for criminal conspiracy. This is very annoying, obviously, and I'd rather not have to deal with it. Finally, once we've gotten around a corner or something, we can stay in that area for a little bit and train our stealth skill while being out of sight of the guards. Then, once all that's done and dusted, we can sell our stuff and train our mercantile. So let's get to it, shall we? While we're stealing stuff, let's break down exactly how this works. You see, since we're so bad at this whole theft racket, we're going to be failing a lot, but understanding why and by how much can teach us how we can train this skill without alerting the guards every single time, if that's even possible. It's time to dig into the code again. In the formulahelper.cs, we find a function called calculate shoplifting chance. This boils down to 3 values: our pickpocket skill, the quality of the shop we enter, and the weight and number of items we're trying to steal. Our pickpocket skill is known, and we can control exactly what we're trying to steal, so what's this about the quality of shops? Shop quality has a few other effects as well, but for now, here's what we need to understand. Whenever you enter a shop, you're given one of 5 different descriptions, from rusty relics to incense and soft music. These descriptions correlate to the overall quality of the shop. Importantly, we know that each building is given a value between 1 and 20, which we can use to give ourselves a range of success chances. It is technically possible to know exactly the quality of a shop, but I wouldn't know exactly where to find those. Instead, we're going to be using some approximations. For example, this shop is better appointed than many, which means that it has a range of 13 to 16 for its quality value. Our pickpocketing skill is 25. Now all we need to do is calculate the weight and num items value. I'm just going to call this the Wani value. This value is just a tad unintuitive, but easy enough to understand. You just add the total number of items and their combined weight together. One 2-kilogram book gives you a value of 3, because one item plus 2 kilograms equals 3. So now we have everything we need to calculate our success chances. We start at 100 and subtract our pickpocket skill. Then we add the Wani value and the shop quality value. In this particular example, we end with a value between 90 and 94. This value, for the record, cannot exceed 95 and cannot be less than 5. But that sounds great, right? No, not really. This number being high is bad. Really bad. This means we have a 6 to 10% chance to succeed in our theft. That 90 to 94 value is kinda rough to deal with. It's gonna be a while before we're actually good at stealing stuff. As a side note, there's something else to understand about the Wani value. If you have one ring with a weight of 0.25 kilos, it only gives you a Wani value of 1 because the weight is converted to an integer. This conversion truncates any decimals and effectively renders the ring weightless for the purpose of the calculation. Similarly, 3 rings gives you a Wani value of 3, but a 4th ring will give you a value of 5, because now the weight is 1. Not that I've ever seen 4 rings on one shelf, but this is good to keep in mind if we ever try to steal jewelry. Since I'm sure somebody's asking the question right now, there's a simple reason that I'm not pickpocketing random NPCs out in the world. The reason is that it's just not really worth it. Your success chance is identical to your pickpocketing skill level, but you'll only ever get 1 to 6 pieces of gold for doing it. In addition, there's about a 33% chance that you'll get nothing at all, even if you are successful. Stealing from NPCs is fun for flavor, but there's no real benefit in doing it. While we were out leveling, we got a letter from the Thieves Guild. They frown on freelancers, and so we were told to steal some pants and prove our loyalty to join them. Easy enough to do. Now we'll always know where a Thieves Guild is anytime we enter a city that has one. For fun, I did each of the quests available to me since they don't take too long to do, and they're all essentially essentially the same thing. Take an item from point A to point B. Sometimes go to C instead. Unfortunately, the Thieves Guild is not particularly interesting. Of important note, this Thieves Guild doesn't actually have any rules against killing innocents, but we're still going to hold to our principle and not become murderers. They were kind enough to reward us with a dungeon location. The best part of the guild is access to the trainer, but we're going to hold off on using that for now. All of this excitement has resulted in another level up, so I think we should get some main story progress, shall we? We're going to be doing a lot of traveling so that I can get a letter from Morgaya. All of this traveling is necessary since we hurt our reputation so much by getting caught breaking and entering in the region. Reputation restores itself to 0 very slowly. A little more than 100 days per point, and she won't send us this letter if we have any negative reputation with her. Now that we have it, let's go deliver her letter to Manamarco. We're going to make use of our recall spell, and this becomes a super easy quest. Now we'll have to go to Daggerfall so we can get Obki's quests. Second verse, same as the first, we'll use recall to make checking up on Nulfaga an extremely quick affair. After this, I decided to go do a little more stealing, and came across a shop with multiple things we want to steal. Afterwards, we returned to Obki, set our anchor, and went to Castle Necromogan to look for some letters. As we travel to the dungeon, we hit level 4. While we're doing that, let's discuss Archery. Archery in Daggerfall is heavily reliant on the speed attribute, much more than the other weapon classes. You see, for the melee weapon skills, speed has a large impact on overall damage output, but once you're above 70 or 80, it mostly becomes a nice to have rather than an actual need. Not so with Archery. Archery is an extremely slow weapon skill, about half the speed of hand to hand. This makes it very low damage by comparison to any of its martial cousins. However, Archery's strength lies in the fact that you are at a distance. Most enemies in Daggerfall really want to close the distance with you and hit you with a sword to kill you. Even spellcasters have respectable damage output in melee. Archery does its best to deny enemies this chance, forcing them to either pull out their own bow or cast a spell. Archery on its own is a perfectly fine weapon skill. It works about as well as any other, and the advantage of having range is actually huge a good portion of the time. Most arrows will be returned to you when you defeat an enemy, but if you actually miss, the arrow is just gone forever, and it didn't even make an attack roll. Keep in mind, a bow is completely useless if you don't have any arrows to use with it. In addition, you still have to deal with weapon degradation happening just like with melee weapons. Luckily, even though you can easily see how much the arrows you have to carry weigh, they don't actually add any weight to your encumbrance. The real biggest issue with bows is how fragile they are, and we'll see that in a little bit. Oh cool, the letters. We'll return these to Obki and get back to doing what we really wanted, which is stealing some more stuff. We'll jump back into the main quest later so we can do that section in one big batch. In the meanwhile, I decide to do some more Thieves Guild quests. We have some new ones, but each of these is pretty much the same as the ones from before. Some of the dialogue seems to imply that there should be an enemy or something in these locations, but the only one where that happened to me was when I ran into a large pack of guards waiting in ambush. But that didn't end up mattering to us. All the while, we're stealing stuff from stores, and unfortunately, I get a bit careless and let the guards attempt a couple of arrests on me. This, unfortunately, will cause problems down the line. We managed to steal some better equipment, and eventually we hit level 5. This is when I decide, you know what, I'd like to get better at stealing. So I went to the Thieves Guild trainer, and after one single session, enemies have spawned inside the building. Checking my regional reputation, I find that I've become known as a scoundrel. That's unfortunate. A scoundrel gets arrested for criminal conspiracy, and that seems to be what the guards want to charge me with. Luckily for me, during all of this, I've received a letter from Prince Lotan of Sentinel. I decide to use this as an excuse to go to Sentinel, and what do I find but a city without a Thieves Guild? Well, that simply won't do. We'll travel to the nearby Linicia and speak with the guild there. We're going to improve our pickpocketing in a manner that's more expedient. You're only able to use trainers to get skills up to level 51, but I do want to have decently high skills when we get into the endgame. Once we're done with those, let's do our level 4 to 6 quests, shall we? You'll forgive me if I do these ever so slightly out of order. I'm putting off Daggerfall's quests until the end since we're still a wanted man over there. Let's start with Lotan, shall we? We'll start start by initiating his quest in Sentinel, and then we're basically forced to wait until a certain letter arrives. We're going to pass the time by going to one of the neighboring countries and engaging in a little thievery. We're going to need to amass a lot of gold if we want to pay for all of our endgame enchantments. Oh yeah, enchantments. We're also going to have to join the Mages Guild at some point, but I'll do that later. For now, we're going to go to Hagia Sophia in search of valuable goods. Luckily, while we're there, we managed to pick up a mithril bow. Very useful indeed. In addition, we find some very valuable stuff that we can sell right back to the guy we stole it from. Eventually, we also found a bookstore. In case you're curious, books are some of the best items to practice stealing with for one simple reason. They're fairly valuable for their weight. Precious gems like diamonds, emeralds, and rubies are better, and high-level equipment is much more valuable, but books are much more common. In addition to this, you may have seen me attempting to pick the locks of random doors as we run around. We're going to be getting some lockpicking training after the next quest, since it's becoming quite apparent that we're not going to be able to reliably break into buildings with it until it's a fairly high level. The unfortunate reality is this: if we fail to pick a lock, we cannot attempt to pick it again unless we either improve the skill or reload a whole dungeon. Effectively, that means we get one try per lock for dungeons, barring the occasions we happen to level the skill. The formulas used to calculate lockpicking success chances are fairly simple, but it's important to note here that there are indeed two formulas. One of them is for picking locks to buildings in the overworld, or exterior locks as the code calls them. This is for breaking into buildings and shops after hours. The other formula is for opening doors within dungeons, known as interior locks. The exterior one is fairly simple. You simply take your lockpicking skill and subtract from it the lock's level multiplied by 5. According to a comment in Daggerfall Unity's code, a magically locked door has a lock level of 20. Since no overworld buildings have magically locked doors, this is approximated by taking the quality of the building, the same one we use to calculate shoplifting chance, and dividing it by 2 to get the lock level. This means that the highest an exterior lock's level can be is 10. A lockpicking skill of 100 will always grant you a 50% chance of opening these locks. For us, with a lowly skill of 29, we're going to struggle to open most buildings. Even a lock value of 1 will only have a 24% chance of success at our current skill, and this quickly diminishes as buildings get higher and higher quality. For interior locks, the formula is ever so slightly different. First, you take your character's level and subtract the lock's value from it. Again, this is a value from 1 to 20, where 20 is a magic lock. Multiply the difference by 5, and then add our lockpicking skill. Both formulas are clamped at 5% and 95%, meaning that no matter how low or high our skill is, our odds will never be higher or lower than those. If this sounds a bit arbitrary, think of it this way. If you have a 5% chance to succeed, that means you can only succeed with a natural 20. If you have a 95% chance to succeed, that means you can only fail with a natural 1. Critical successes and critical failures, as it were. The difference with these interior locks, however, is that we're able to estimate our chances of success by observing them. The different messages you see actually equate to an approximate difficulty relative to your lockpicking skill. You can technically do this with exterior locks as well, but according to comments in the code, it still uses the interior lock calculation, which makes the message inaccurate. Not that observing them like this does anything for you, unfortunately. You still only get one try at them, but it is nice flavor. But enough about locks and lockpicking. We've gotten to level 7 and have been attacked by a zombie from Manimarco. He's inviting us to Skurg Barrow for a quest. We're still not done with the quest for Prince Loten, so we're going to put old Manny on the back burner while we figure that nonsense out. Eventually, we get our letter from the Underking and are invited to speak with one of his agents. The agent informs us of Castle Phaelem, where we will learn the truth of what happened to Prince Loten's older brother. Oh yeah, that's what we were doing. It's during this dungeon that tragedy strikes. The mithril bow we just stole didn't even make it through the dungeon. It shot a decent number of arrows, but it broke long before any of the melee weapons would have. It's not a huge tragedy since we can just pick up a steel longbow and get right back to using our arrows, but in higher level dungeons we may need to consider bringing a backup weapon, especially when we encounter enemies that require mithril quality or higher to hit. We eventually eventually find the death certificate and can return to Loten. He thanks us for helping him, and now we're going to go to Wayrest and get some more training. Funnily enough, traveling here gets us another letter, this time from the Queen of Sentinel, Archery. She also has a quest for us. We're drowning in available quests. Leveling our lockpicking skill to 51 will put us just into level 9, and we're still way behind doing our available main story quests. We're going to see if we can catch up a little bit now that the main skills we were struggling to level are where we want them to be. To that end, we're going to speak with Prince Helseth and help him blackmail Lord Castellian. This takes 5 seconds. When we return, we'll speak with his stepsister, Princess Elisana, and help her assassinate Lord Castellian. I'm playing both sides, so I can't lose. This will finish up the quest we needed to do here, and we can go back to Daggerfall, where we are still wanted for our many crimes. Here we have 3 quests to complete, so let's hop to it. First up, werewolf hunting. Fairly simple. Go to Tristor Laboratory on the island of Bethany and kill a werewolf. Then we can speak with Dowager Queen Minisera and try to find out what happened to the Emperor's courier. Once we know, we can set an anchor at the palace and wait for them to arrive. In the meantime, I'm going to level up my magical skills some. Don't worry, we're not going to gain a character level from this. I just want my spells to be a little cheaper. For this, we're going to be joining the Mages Guild. Since we're wanted in Daggerfall, we're going to do this in a neighboring country where we can train without worrying about the guards coming to get us. Here is where we're going to be leveling our mysticism to 51 and our alteration to 25. The only reason our alteration isn't going higher than that is because we ran out of money and I want to avoid leveling completely unnecessarily. We still have 18 days before the courier arrives at the castle, so we're going to do a little bit more traveling and then finally activate our anchor to go back to the palace. With this, we can break into the castle and speak with the courier. He gives us a bracelet to prove to Minisera that he's all above board and didn't do anything shady. Great, so now we can get back to the quest that leads us to the midway point for the story. For this, we'll go to Orsinium and speak with Gortwag, who will basically wave us off like, yeah, whatever dude, if you can find it, you can have it, before we enter the dungeon and find the Emperor's letter almost instantly. Almost like I've been here a few times before or something. Finding the letter, we can return to Minisera, and that marks about half of the main quest complete. Unfortunately, we've got a bit of a problem now. We need more weapons. The new mithril bow we stole between the other quests is already pretty used, and I still need to get my alteration level to a point where I can actually cast a paralysis spell. That means we're going to have to do some more training. We'll also make a custom paralysis spell and a true invisibility spell. I'll get more into that later. For now, we're going to do that quest for Manimarco. First, we're going to go meet up with him in his domain, the fanciful prick, and accept his quest. Then we'll go to Castle Sentinel and make our way to this lever puzzle. The puzzle is easy enough and it leads us to our first encounter with a lich. And here's where I want to explain another mechanic that is greatly helped by being stealthy: backstabbing. We'll paralyze the lich to make this easier to demonstrate, but basically, here's the deal. When attacking an enemy from behind, you gain a bonus to your 2 hit score equal to your backstabbing level. This raw increase often makes you much more likely to hit your enemy. When making a backstabbing attack, the game will also roll an additional D100 after your main attack roll to determine whether you get backstab damage. Your backstabbing level is equal to your percent chance to succeed in this check. When you do succeed, you'll get this text. This indicates that your attack has done triple damage. Choosing alteration as one of our skills was supposed to help make getting this triple damage bonus a consistent part of our playstyle with paralysis. Unfortunately, paralysis is an extremely expensive spell effect, so we're going to have to do something about that. Once we get him, we'll speak with Queen Akarithi, who wants a painting. Then we'll go give Manny the soul that we collected. Now, all that we have to do is grab the painting from Wayrest. Easy money. Now that we're in Wayrest, it's worth noting that the guards will not be happy about our intrusion into the bowels of the castle. In fact, as soon as we touch the door, they'll turn hostile and start attacking us. So, we'll pop an invisibility and slip right by them. You've probably watched me use this spell when escaping shops after stealing. But how exactly do these spells work? So, first, there are 3 illusion effects to discuss: Chameleon, Shadow Form, and and invisibility. Chameleon is the weakest spell effect. Essentially, it's invisibility, but only if you're standing perfectly still. And looking at the code, it's actually even more annoying, because it has a failure rate of 8%. That means even if you're standing still like you're supposed to, there's still an 8% chance you'll be seen. Obviously, this isn't great. I've seen a few people talk about using this spell effect for sleeping in dungeons, but honestly, I haven't ever found that more convenient than simply backtracking a little bit. Shadow form is our next level up. This one doesn't require us to stand still, which is a huge improvement already. Unfortunately, it also only works indoors. This is my preferred method of casting illusion magic, and here's the thing. It's a direct improvement over Chameleon. Not only does it work all the time when indoors, as opposed to only when you're standing still, it also only has a 4% failure rate, which is even lower than Chameleon. This might not sound like a huge improvement, but what if I tell you that Chameleon and Shadow form have the same cost? Just the fact that it lets you move puts Shadow form leagues ahead of Chameleon in my book. Finally is invisibility. As the most expensive spell effect and the poster child for illusion as a magical school, it does exactly as it says. Enemies who are attempting to detect you will fail every time. It's important to note, however, that there are a decent amount of enemies who can see through all these forms of invisibility. These would be imps, all of the Daedra, and almost all of the undead, with the strange exceptions of zombies and the Ancient Lich. Zombies I can maybe get, the Ancient Lich feels unintentional, but I'm not going to complain. One last note about these spell effects. They all have two versions. Normal and true. Normal versions are dispelled when you make an attack against an enemy. Essentially, they're good for getting one sneak attack off, and then you have to use your stealth skill again. Oh yeah, by the way, if you're using one of these spell effects, then you're not using your stealth skill. Their senses are obscured by magic, so your stealth skill is never checked. Just thought that might be important to understand. While I was yapping about invisibility and other nonsense, I grabbed the painting and returned to Archery. We handed off to her, accept our payment, and I think it's time that we prepare to do some enchanting. That means quests for the Mages Guild. Grinding reputation is going to be mildly annoying, but not terribly difficult. We'll get ourselves set up nicely with a little bit of extra reputation so that we don't have to worry about losing our rank unexpectedly. It's during these quests that we get yet another call from the main story. We have 1 month to meet with an agent of the Underking. No big deal. In fact, this is just going to be extra cash for us, right? Yeah, mostly. We do run into a slight hiccup with our bow breaking, but this was eventually remedied by picking up a Daedric Saber and using our true invisibility spell to fish for backstabs against most enemies. It's still on theme, but it does make things slightly more difficult because we haven't exactly been training any melee weapon skills. Particularly, the Ancient Vampire causes some problems for us since it's capable of seeing through our invisibility. Once we can finally take it down, we're able to grab the cursed item and return to the Underking's agent, completing the quest and pushing us into the final stretch of mainline quests. We finish getting our Mages Guild reputation, and this leads us to an unfortunate reality. Even after doing all of this, we can't actually afford to enchant our equipment. At least, not all of it. Worse yet, we don't even have all of the equipment that we want. This means it's time for another crime spree. We're going to go terrorize some small country. Perhaps Bergama? To prepare for this, let's pick up another spell. A 100% open spell. Open is a spell effect in the mysticism school, and is a fun option if you don't really care much for the lockpicking skill. Now, making the spell effect reach 100% is totally doable. What's important to know, however, is that you can only open a lock this way if you're at least the same level as the lock you're trying to open. We mentioned before that exterior locks use their building quality divided by 2 in order to determine lock level. Since the highest building quality is 20, that means that now, at level 10, we should be able to open every single locked shop with this spell. Inside of dungeons, we'd need to be level 20 for that guarantee, but luckily we don't need to enter a single dungeon in order to get the money that we need. It doesn't take too long before we get a little extra cash under our belts. Now all we need to do is find a magic item vendor who sells soul-trapped ancient liches, so that we can swipe them. Fun fact, soul gems are immediately restocked when you leave a vendor's inventory. It takes us a decently long time to acquire all of the funds necessary to enchant all of our trinkets. So while we're doing that, let's discuss responsible enchanting. Responsible enchanting isn't about nerfing yourself. It's about understanding what to enchant and by how much. During my video showing off how strong magic was, I got all of my magical skills up into the 200s for basically no reason. Magic skills reduce the cost of their related spells, and once they're up to somewhere around 120 to 130, all of those spells will only cost 5 spell points. This also creates a general guideline to work against. At a skill level of 130, most skills will stop having any more benefit. There are exceptions to this, like hand-to-hand will scale damage based on your skill level, no matter how high it goes. Alright, that's a lot of waffling, but what does it actually mean? It means we're going to set limits on how far we enchant our equipment. We covered that magic stops seeing any benefit somewhere between 115 and 130, so that means alteration, illusion, and mysticism are going to stop there. Next, we'll discuss our pickpocket skill. We went over the formula before, and here's what it looked like. Technically speaking, this one is also uncapped. You could choose to try and steal full sets of equipment at once if you really wanted to. I decided that pickpocketing would be capped at 152. If you're wondering how I came to this number, the answer is simple. A set of Daedric armor weighs 30 kilograms, and there are 7 pieces of it. That means the Wani value to steal a full set of the best equipment is 37. If you're at the highest quality shop, you suffer a -20 penalty. That means our total penalty is 57. With 100 pickpocketing, that still means a 43% chance of success. Getting to 152 pushes that to a 95% chance of success, which, as you may remember, is the upper limit. Realistically, you don't need more than 120 or so if you're only stealing one item at a time. But hey, we're supposed to be master thieves. Speaking of a master thief, let's talk lockpicking. If we want an exterior lock success chance of 95%, we need a lockpicking skill of 145. This value is true regardless of what point in the game we're at. For interior locks, we'll need a lock value of 135 because we're level 12. This requirement goes down by 5 every time we gain a level, so we're just going to use the exterior lock value. Stealth and Mercantile are our hypothetically uncapped skills. Stealth does see pretty severe diminishing returns, however. For example, we currently have a stealth skill that sits at 256, so we should be undetectable until we're within 5 meters of an enemy. The skill level we need to get to 4 meters is 320, and if we want to get to 3 meters, we'll need to get to 427. Anything higher than this is unachievable. It's still hypothetically possible for it to go higher, but since we don't have infinite enchantment slots, we're out of luck on that front. Mercantile is useful because I've been gathering funds incrementally, so I can see that by now I've crossed the threshold into selling things for more than they're worth. Take that, merchants. The amount of money you earn from a sale has a few factors, but primarily it's your personality attribute and your mercantile skill. This is the main reason I kept personality around, because there's another thing I want to see. A secret objective that we'll get to near the end. After we enchant our trinkets, I decide to continue the main quest a little bit. We'll complete our enchantment loadout once we can get access to some better equipment. We're going to go visit Medora with our newly enchanted equipment. This is where I was really hoping to see the power of our stealth enchantments, but they don't seem to be doing much for us. We are still pretty powerful, so I kill most of the enemies between us and Medora, trying to get backstabs along the way. When we eventually reach Medora, she tells us she needs the great unicorn horn from Shedungeon, so we set an anchor in the dungeon and head on out. In here, the Daedric shortbow we had just gotten breaks again. This trend is becoming frustratingly common. Luckily, we have a Daedric Wakizashi and can make our way through without much issue anyways. Once we get the horn, we can teleport back to our anchor and hand it off to Medora fairly quickly. early. She thanks us and promises to help us with the next steps of the main quest later. For now, that means that we can't get anything else from her, so we leave the dungeon. We have about a month before she'll contact us again, so I take this time to try and get some more money. We enchant our skirt and 2 cloaks with some cool stuff and are desperately searching shops in hopes of finding a Daedric or Orcish helmet, cuirass, and gauntlets. Every so often, I'll break into a bookstore and steal so many books. It's actually kind of insane how valuable the books are. High-level weapons and armor are better, obviously, but they're so much more rare than books. Books are fucking everywhere. I got almost 500,000 gold from mostly books, and we still haven't found the equipment we want. Oh well, at least we can reliably steal basically anything we want now. We managed to snag a Daedric cuirass and some Orcish gauntlets, and along the way we picked up 1,000,000 gold. I turned this million into a letter of credit, and we get a vision from Medora. She needs us to go to Orsinium and speak with Gortwag about some dust. This dust is important for speaking to the dead king, or whatever this story's about. This dungeon is actually pretty familiar, and it doesn't take us too long to find our way to where the mummy spawns. We also have so many extra bows. 3 short bows and 3 long bows. All Daedric, of course. Daedric weapons are much more common than their armor counterparts. It's worth noting that the stealth is really noticeable now. We're able to easily backstab most of the enemies in this dungeon, one-shotting most of them. Once we get the dust back to Medora, she tells us to come back in a month. Sounds good to me, so let's do some more theft, shall we? We're still missing a high-quality helmet. We'll keep an eye out for some gauntlets too, just in case. While we're searching for those, hey, check it out. We're now earning money from staying at inns. They are literally paying us. I even double-checked. We eventually managed to find a nice pair of Daedric gauntlets, but still no dice on the helmet. After a month, we return to Medora and she gives us the Dust of Restful Death. After this, we spend a little more time enchanting the rest of our equipment until all we're missing is our helmet and boots. I decide now is a good time to take the dust to Lysandas's tomb and hear what the old corpse has to say. We've got a repair equipment enchantment now, so hopefully we can avoid needing to use any of the backup bows that I've got waiting in the wings, but I'm still going to bring one, just in case. Lysandas's tomb is one of the larger dungeons in the game, and offers us plenty of opportunity to try being stealthy. It does seem mostly possible. The thin corridors are obviously limiting, but enemies seem to have trouble identifying us as a threat until we're well within their sight lines. And enemies who happen to be facing away from us go down with a single arrow. Even so, however, there seem to be times when the enemy can simply tell where we are from quite a ways away. Oh well, perhaps a few more enchantments will finally render us totally invisible. We find our way to Lysandas's body, and he tells us that he wants revenge on some other guy called Lord Woodbourne. Easy enough. We go to Woodbourne Hall and use this as yet another opportunity to be stealthy, and here's where it really starts getting difficult. We're now level 14, and the majority of the enemies we encounter in Woodbourne Hall are humans, and particularly we run into a lot of barbarians. Human enemies scale to your level, and barbarians have a lot of health. This means that one backstab typically isn't enough to actually kill them, so we end up having to do a lot more proper fighting than we'd really like to. At least getting to chunk our enemy's health is a meaningful difference. We find Woodbourne, stick a few arrows in him, and leave the dungeon. With that, we're just waiting on the letter from Briscienna, and in the meantime, we're going to do some more thieving. I suppose I should share what my ultimate goal is with all the theft at this point. I want to see how much money I can get if I sell at least 225 kilograms of Daedric equipment to a low-quality shop. 225 is one full inventory at maximum strength with a plus 50% carry capacity enchantment. I considered doing the full 750 of the cart, but getting all of the equipment was taking too long. My initial desire was to do this exclusively with Daedric gauntlets, as they are the most valuable item in the game by weight. Unfortunately, Daedric armor is extremely rare, and getting more than a few pieces like I've done takes far too long for the investment to be actually worth it. Honestly, high-level armor in general seems to be exceptionally rare when compared to weapons. No matter. I settle on a mithril helmet, and once I get the letter, we continue with the main quest. I decided that the guards in Daggerfall Castle get to live, or at least they wouldn't die by my hand. I used an invisibility spell and walked through the whole area, only ever alerting a pair of wraiths that killed a few unfortunate guards. The invisibility spell works wonders for getting through without being noticed, which is phenomenal. We grab the Totem of Tiber Septim from its place in the vault and escape with little incident. I even pickpocketed most of the guards in the throne room on the way out, just to really rub it in. The greatest heist in High Rock's history, and the guards were none the wiser. We flee Daggerfall, and I spend just a little longer looking for a better helmet to no avail. With nothing doing, I finish off our enchantments, and we're finally fully decked out in magical equipment. I even enchanted my bow with some spells that'll cast on strike. So, what exactly are our final skill levels after all of these enchantments? Our stealth is at 427, which is exactly the amount we need to maintain a stealth chance of over 100 at a distance of 3 meters away. Fun fact, this is the highest skill that stealth is still effective at. In order to get down to 2 meters, you'd need a skill of 640 and 1280 for 1 meter. Our mercantile is up to 397, which has helped us immensely in accumulating 5 million gold. Our pickpocketing and lockpicking are at 157 and 148 respectively, meaning we should have a 95% chance to succeed when doing either of those things anywhere. Archery has been pretty good, save for my complaints about bow durability. With this, we've only got one last thing to do before I hand the totem off to someone. Let's see how much we earn when we sell this massive haul of assorted Daedric weapons and armor. We head to a town in Daggerfall called New Tower, and the owner of Dr. Tristorian's used merchandise cuts us a check for 2.7 million gold, an actually insane number. So, who are we going to give the totem to? We've done criminal activity in so many places in the world that it's difficult to get a night's rest in any of the big cities without the guards coming to arrest us. Doing this has made living in those cities a pain in the ass. As such, we're going to give the totem to Menamarco in hopes that he will fix our global reputation. As we hand the totem off to Manny, Nulthaga's voice will ring in our head, telling us that we've got more work to do. We'll meet with her and prepare to go through the Mantellan Crux. While I'm doing the final dungeon, let's wrap things up a little bit. Now, we knew from the beginning that a stealth-based class was going to be the weakest in combat of the traditional trio. Mages become extremely powerful early on and only get stronger as the game progresses. Melee is generally pretty balanced, but with extremely high peaks when pushed to its absolute limit. Stealth, by its very nature, wants to avoid combat, but unfortunately that's just not a real option for most of Daggerfall. So let's go over exactly why. The formula for the stealth skill is extremely useful to understand for enemies who haven't been alerted yet. Unfortunately, it just so happens that sometimes enemies alert each other, and if you're moving normally around them, it doesn't matter how high your skill is. They know exactly where you are until you can create enough distance that you can hide by moving at half speed. This is incredibly difficult to take advantage of in the tight corridors of most of Daggerfall's dungeons. Speaking of, since we're on the subject of combat, let's also discuss archery. The bow and arrow, being our weapon of choice, has a few advantages and a few drawbacks. The main advantage, obviously, is the ability to engage from a distance. A long distance, too. Bows are also incredibly light. A Daedric longbow is 2 kilograms with an average damage of 17. For comparison, a one-handed Daedric longsword is 5.5 kilograms and has an average damage of 15, and a Daedric claymore is 9.5 kilograms with an average damage of 16. In fact, the only weapon that does more base damage per hit is the Daedric Daikatana, which averages 18, and that weapon still weighs 4.5 kilograms. And remember, arrows are weightless, despite having a displayed weight. This makes them ideal for any build that might be a little light on strength and needs to conserve carrying capacity. These strengths, however, are balanced out by two things primarily. First of all, bows seem to have much less durability than melee weapons. I had many more problems with bow durability than I've ever had with melee weapons. This isn't really a big problem for a normal playthrough. Paying a blacksmith some gold and getting a bow repaired isn't too much of a problem, it's just mildly annoying. Second is that bows are slow. Incredibly slow. At 100 speed, they attack around once per second. For comparison, melee melee weapons attack somewhere around 3 to 5 times per second. This means that even despite the high base damage, the actual damage per second of bows is much lower. This is why we tried to rely on backstabbing to triple the damage of our first attacks as often as we could. These three skills, stealth, archery, and backstabbing, all mesh surprisingly well together. Stealth gets better the further away you are from your target. Backstabbing your target is easier if they haven't noticed you, and longbows actually have a fairly high base damage, making getting triple damage a fairly big upside. These three things have great interplay that can be pretty powerful. It's just unfortunate that it doesn't have much opportunity to shine because stealth as a skill simply isn't good enough in most situations. As mentioned, we already knew this would be the weakest playstyle for combat. So what about out of combat? The pickpocketing skill in particular has allowed us to waltz into any shop and take basically anything we want without consequence. This actually turned money into almost a total non-issue, something that neither of the other two playstyles can say. If you wanted to earn as much money as our thief did, you would need to take out loans from at least 7 different regions, where you could take out the maximum loan of 1.1 million gold. And this was done passively while leveling and looking for better equipment. Obviously, this was helped massively by Mercantile. Out of curiosity, I also tested how much gold we could get if we had completely dropped our personality in our final massive transaction, and it resulted in a difference of around 125,000 gold. That sounds like a lot, but it's only about 5% of that total sale. Still, I can confidently say that personality earned me over 100,000 gold by itself. I swear I'll find a way to make this attribute useful. Lockpicking was a mixed bag. The only time where it's actually been better than casting an open spell has been in the rare event where a lock is a higher level than our character. In the main quest, this was a fairly rare occurrence, as a large majority of doors are simply not locked. And the skill is completely trivialized once you realize that you can simply bash the doors in and never bother with it. This is all well and good for dungeoning, but that's not really what it's for. This skill was actually very nice when breaking into buildings at night. Lockpicking a building doesn't attract the guards like bashing doors in. This is primarily useful because, as you might have noticed, getting attacked by guards every time you wake up gets really annoying. It's also good if you want to keep your reputation at a higher level for whatever reason. The biggest problem with lockpicking is that as soon as you're around level 10, an open spell becomes much more reliable for most purposes. I ended up using one as a backup on the off chance my lockpicking attempt would fail. In fact, the biggest problem with open spells is just that it's an expensive spell effect, meaning that you can only use it once or twice until you level your mysticism quite a bit. Illusion as a school worked extremely well. Illusion's biggest weakness is just the fact that there are so many enemies who can see through the magic. In the Mantellan Crux, for example, there are very few enemies that you run into who will be deceived by it. A decent amount of story dungeons like Castle Necromogan will have undead enemies, so its usefulness gets limited, but when it is useful, it is extremely useful. The last of the skills we really cared about was Alteration. Alteration I picked up primarily because I wanted to use its paralysis effect. The effect came in handy, but I didn't use it as much as I thought I would, because it just didn't feel right most of the time. We did run into the fact that there are some enemies who are immune to it. Vampires were immune to the fact that I had made it poison, and I believe that knights are immune to paralysis in general. So just how strong is stealth in Daggerfall? In combat, it's fairly weak. You do less damage than magic users, you're more fragile than warriors, and stealth as a skill is just not very good, even at ridiculously high levels. This means that the playstyle's main tool is the least effective. Outside of combat, however, this style of class is very strong. Stealth itself might be weak, but pickpocket and lockpicking are exceptional. Not only do they offer a 5-finger discount on equipment, you can sell anything that you don't plan to use for some extra cash, letting you really rake it in. So yes, the thief is traditionally weak, but flavor-wise, I think it's exceptional. It excels at doing what it really sets out to do, and I think that's pretty cool. And now, the greatest heist in history is completed, as we touch the Mantella and return to Tamriel, finishing the game, and now we get to sit back and read history, as it shall be written upon the Elder Scrolls. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this demystified some of Daggerfall Unity's mechanics for you. It's been fun trying to back up what I say with what's written into the code of the game. If you enjoyed, then make sure to subscribe. I try to put out these videos once a month, and I stream somewhat regularly if you want to pop in and say hi. I hope you have a good rest of your day, morning, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are in the world, and I'll talk to you later.